Hello friendos and randos, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be covering the EB01 new meta deck, RP Law. So Red Purple Law got a few pretty decent buffs in EB01, the most notable ones being Kid and Killer as well as the new Bon Clay SEC, and I'll be showing you a good deck list that you can run for the EB01 meta in order to kind of get a couple of wins here and there hopefully. Currently in OP07, RP Law is one of the best decks in format. It's the deck that I'm currently playing after Sakazuki is banned. And I think it's a really fun deck to play. It has a lot of different interesting plays that you can make, and I want to show a little bit of that as well as potentially how you can build your decks for EB01 moving forward. So I'm going to start off with the first part of the video, which will be the core components of RP Law deck list as well as the different tech options that you kind of have, and from there you can kind of decide, I guess, what cards and what focuses you want to have for your deck build and what kind of preferences you have for the remaining slots in the deck. But there are a few cards that I think are definitely best in slot, and you probably should not be swapping those out if at all. So first off, like I was mentioning, we have the new EB01 Kid and Killer card. So 4 cost, 5k power when attacking, and rush as well. And when attacking, if your opponent has 2 life or less, this character gains plus 2000 power. So very powerful card. It's essentially 4 cost 7k rush if your opponent has the right life threshold, which makes it very good for aggro as well as pushing damage and lethal. Calling it out with your leader effect at the end gives you a free 4 cost 7k rush, and then after that, if you have any leftover Dawn, of course that also goes on to him to push that last bit of damage. Next up, we have the new EB01 secret card, which is Bon Clay. Bon Clay is a really good card for this deck as well. The key thing being that on play, it allows you to ramp an active Dawn, which is really good. On, for example, your 4 Dawn turn, you're able to play him down as well as play a Gordon and then use your leader effect, or you're able to play him down and then after that attach on the leader and swing. Or when you're using it in conjunction with your leader effect, if it gives you enough active Dawn, you can play another character down with the rest of your active Dawn. So I'll give a few examples of how that works later as well. Other than that, when attacking, he also copies the attack of one of your opponent's characters. So for example, against black decks with Moria, against yellow decks with Yamato, it will copy that 9k stat line and then attack into your opponent with it, which is really powerful. You can also use it to attack and trade into your opponent's characters, which is good. But most importantly is because it copies that stat line, for a deck that doesn't usually have as much Dawn or many large characters, this gives you a very big beater using your opponent's large characters as the kind of proxy to attack. So really good card as well. Then on to the rest of the core, which is cards that already I guess are pretty good in RP Law, even in OP06. First we have the Reiju. So 4 cost 5k power on play. If you have the same or less Dawn than your opponent, draw 2 cards. This is one of the most important cards in the deck in order to maintain your hand size as well as to continue to apply pressure as well as to continue to protect your board. So being able to play the Reiju down, refilling your hand size so that you can continue to play more things the next turn and continue to flood your board as well as to pressure your opponents, it makes it a very key card for the deck. Then of course we have the 5 cost kit. 5 cost kit, blocker as well as once per turn. When you return Dawn from your board, you get 1 active Dawn back. So it gives you a refund on some of your Dawn used for your leader effect as well. And when you're using this in conjunction with Bon Clay, it can give you enough active Dawn to play another 3 or 4 cost character down as well, which is really good. Okay, next we have Shachi and Penguin. Shachi and Penguin are of course a key card as well in the deck. You will need it in order to, for 1, have your 2k counters, as well as for 2, it allows you to ramp 2 Dawn when you have 3 Dawn or less on your board. So very common combination with Kid. You play Kid down and then you leader effect and play down Shachi and Penguin, and you go back to however many Dawn you had at the beginning of the turn as well. So that's very good. Notably, you have to use it when you're 6 Dawn or less for Shachi and Penguin to still have this effect. But that's fairly easy to kind of have as well. Okay, the next core card we have is Ayin. 4 cost 5k power on play, ramp 1 rested Dawn. So the reason this is the core card instead of Beppo is because for 1, the ramp is unconditional, so you always get to ramp on play, and that means that it doesn't matter how many Dawn your opponent has. So you can play it down on 4 Dawn, whereas with Beppo you can't play him down unless you're using your leader ability already. And this also sets up your future turns to be, again, to have more Dawn. So for example, if we're running Ace in the deck, when going second we can go Iron into Ace on the following turn, which is very powerful as well. Okay, and then the last, to wrap up the core cards we have in the deck, is Gordon. So of course with 06 we also have the new Race Max, which is essentially Gordon in a different skin, so you can also use 4 of that instead. But generally most decks are going to be running a combination of Gordon as well as Race Max, and I'll show you the rest of the core I guess tech options for the deck after this. But at the moment, these 28 cards are the locked in, like you're not going to be changing these like ever. I think no deck is going to be cutting any of these cards from your RP Law list, and that's because all of these contribute very significantly to like the core game plan of the deck, which is attack your opponent as well as maintain your Dawn at a reasonable level, push aggro, and draw hand cards. So these are what I consider to be the core 28 cards of the deck, and then the remaining 22 can be kind of adjusted depending on your preferences. So I'm going to show you the remaining tech options that I think are good. I was saying earlier, of course, other than Gordon, you do have Race Max now. So Race Max is also a very good option in order to increase the total number of power reduction you have in your deck. The RP Law deck list is basically fitted into 3 different categories. First, you have ramp or re-ramp, depending on how you're going to play it. Then you also have aggro and attackers, so 5k bodies that attack and have additional effects. So of course things like Shachi Penguin and Iron fall into both of these categories. And then lastly you have power reduction, so things like Gordon, Race Max, and you also have cards like Ace, Fire Fist, Otama, and Chopper. So I'll show you a few of the other texts later, but first off, talking about Race Max, depending on the deck list as well as the meta, I think Race Max can be anywhere from a 2 to a 4 off. It's also dependent on your overall preference. I think for me, for EB01, I really like the idea of combining Race Max with the 2-cost Fire Fist event. Now, the main reason for this is because in EB01, because Sakazuki is still going to be best deck in format, Fire Fist is really good at dealing with their Rebecca alongside one of their Luchis or one of their other characters. So you're able to get rid of the Rebecca for free and then also bottom deck like a Luchi, bottom deck maybe a Borsalino or a Kuzan or something like that as well. So this is a really powerful card. Some Morias are also running the Rebecca, of course, so it'll help you get rid of that. In other matchups, it's not as useful unless maybe you use it in combination with like the 4-cost Law. You can KO like a 2k power or something unit alongside whatever you're bottoming. So that's all the reasons why I kind of like this card a lot. On top of that, of course, the trigger is pretty strong when it comes to defensive. Like if it's your last life and you hit this trigger, it can really make or break the difference between lethal and losing the game. So I think other than that, the last 2 options for power reduction, so the last 3 options for power reduction are, firstly, we have the Otama. I think Otama is a really good shout for this spot as well because of the 2k counter. So most commonly you will see decks running Shachi Penguin as well as the Otama. If not, there are a few other options for 2k counters as well, which we'll cover later. But for power reduction, I think Otama is a pretty good shout out because of the fact that Moria is going to be meta, RP Law is probably going to be meta, and a lot of those decks have 5k power as their standard baseline for attackers, and that will allow you to, you know, bottom deck it about as efficiently as with a Gordon as well. And similarly, on that train of thought, another card that is pretty good on that minus 2k slot is also this 4-cost Film Law. The Film Law is on play, give one of your opponent's characters minus 2000 power, and with that, and along with the Fire Fist, you can get an equivalent to minus 6k, so that is like 2 Gordons worth, or with that and Gordon, you can hit a 8k unit because it's minus 5. So I quite like this card in the EB01 meta because of that, the fact that Mirror, Moria, and Sakazuki are going to be pretty prevalent. For Sakazuki, this only really hits the 4-cost Kuzan because most of their cards are not going to be at that 5k stat line. Most of them are going to be 6k. I guess it does hit Hina, which is also a pretty good card to bottom deck if you are able to. And then the other new option for power reduction is 3-cost Chopper. 3-cost Chopper is a pretty popular card, and in the current OPO7 format, and I think the reason for that is because of the Sakazuki ban. I would not recommend playing it in EB01 because I think for one, Great Eruption and Lucci are pretty common cards still. In OPO7, the 4-cost Lucci is actually a lot less common in decks, so I think the Chopper is a bit better than. In EB01, although this is a new EB01 card, I wouldn't recommend you really play it because of the fact that Houndblaze and Sakazuki Leader Effect will get rid of it very easily, or Sakazuki Leader Effect as well as Lucci will get rid of it very easily. So it doesn't really make the cut in my opinion for a EB01 focus deck. And then the last power reduction card option that I think is pretty good is the 7-cost Ace. 7-cost Ace is really strong because it attacks reduces two different characters' power by 3k. So if your opponent has a 6k power active unit and a rested unit, you can attack into the rested unit and also bottom the active unit, which is really strong. Not only that, is the largest attacker available in the deck, I think, at the moment. At 7k power, you're going to be able to use it in future turns to attack with that 7k base as well. And the 7 cost also makes it harder for a lot of decks to get rid of, especially like Moria. They would have to burn an Ice Age on it in order to remove it with Absalom. And although for Sakazuki it is much easier to get rid of this 7 cost stat line with like a Hina and Houndblaze, I think it's still a good shout to include in your decks because it is really good against Moria, it's pretty good against NL as well. So these are the main slots that you have for power reduction. I think the 4 of Gordon as well as at least 2 race max is probably mandatory, and then after that the remaining slots are kind of up to your preference. So of course you will still need 8 2k counters minimum, so if you're not playing any other 2k counters you will probably run 4 Otama. But generally I would recommend around 10 to 14 cards that reduce power in your deck. So any combination of some of these in order to make sure that you can consistently remove your opponent's board in order to maintain that pressure on them. That being said, for EB01 meta, I think my top picks for power reduction are Fire Fist, Otama, and the 4-cost Film Law. And the main reason for that is because of Sakazuki meta, the Ace may be a bit too slow. You might want to push a bit more damage instead and a bit more rush, and also a bit wider of a board. So I would personally prefer the 4-cost Film Law a bit more, but I might still run Ace as like a 2-off maybe. So that's it for the power reduction side of things. Next we're going to talk a little bit about other options for the deck. So for the deck, another key portion is of course ramp. So that's why we had cards like Ayin, Shachi Penguin, Bon Clay, as well as of course the 5-cost kit as very key cards in the deck. So some other few options for maintaining your Dawn at a high count also include cards like, I think, Beppo and Zorojiro are pretty good options for this. So first off, they have pretty different strengths, I would say. Zorojiro is good because he is a 3-cost unit, so you're able to drop him down early, and sometimes he also acts as a, I guess, free protection, because sometimes when you put him down on 3, people won't attack you on the 4th on turn, which is also good because then you save yourself 1 life and you save yourself some counter as well. On top of that, he also ramps active Dawn, which gives you kind of that extra flexibility in order to play with more Dawn on the following turn. For example, usually on your 5 Dawn turn, after you play down Zorojiro, you can only play down Kit and then you leader effect and you're not really able to bottom deck anything. But with Zorojiro, you can attack without attaching Dawn, get 1 active Dawn, and play Kit plus Gordon and bottom deck whatever 4-cost your opponent played. Since you're also playing down a blocker, you're also able to protect the Zorojiro a little bit better and make it so that he's more likely to stick on the board, which I think is a pretty good combination as well. Now for Beppo, he's good because his effect is on play directly, so you don't have to wait till the following turn to attack, and he can also be used in future turns to continuously generate more Dawn. The reason I personally don't like him as much as Zorojiro is because, for one, I like having more 3-cost units so that I have more slots in the area, and I can reduce the number of times where on 3 Dawn turn I just have to put 3 on leader and gem AK phase, which is something that I don't usually prefer. I like to have that additional body for pressure. Then on top of that, I think that because Ayin is on play and doesn't require your opponent to have more Dawn than you, being able to play on curve is more important so that you can set up for your future turns. a very common play is also on your 4-down turn to play Ayin into Shachi Penguin, and then that would give you 4-down again, so you can continue playing on curve while still maintaining and developing a wider board. So these are the two other ramp options that you really have for the deck. In EB07, there's also a few decks that are running Miss All Sunday as the 5-cost option for the deck. I think that's not a bad call as well, because of the fact that it does give you card draw as well as ramp. So it kind of replaces the 5-cost kit when you don't have it on curve, and it also lets you again trigger a body out for luck if you kind of need that in your last like lethal situations, and also lets you draw cards as well. So those are very good options for Miss All Sunday as well. So that I think covers the ramp side of things. So now I want to talk a bit about 3-cost unit options. So I just talked about Zorojiro for ramp, and also of course the Chopper for power reduction. But the other two main choices you have for 3-cost units are also number 1, Shiraya. Shiraya is really good because of the BY Luffy matchup. He really helps you with making sure that you can attack at higher power as well when they are at 9k base or something like that as well. And other than that, he also is a blocker that helps you save on hand cards, because when your opponent attacks with their leader, for example, they swing with 7k with their leader, you can block and then throw a 1k counter instead of throwing 3k counter from hand or taking the damage. And you can also use it to protect your board, of course, which is very strong. I think in terms of the 3-cost blocker slot, I like Shiraya a lot more than Chopper, at least in the EB01 meta as well. And I think, again, it's very crucial that he supports your BY Luffy matchup, because when they are constantly at 9k base, it's very difficult to push for damage if you don't have cards like Shiraya or Bon Clay on the board. And then the last 3-cost option is of course the Rush Zoro card. I think Rush Zoro is really good in a Sakazuki focus meta, because you want to make sure you can pressure with him. You want to make sure you can do like a lot of damage early to the Sakazuki, and then each attack from a Rush Zoro is at least 1 hand card usually, or 1 damage even, which is really strong. And it supports you in getting your Kid and Killer online earlier as well, because you want to make sure you're pushing that Sakazuki for a lot of damage early and preventing him from dragging the game out too long, so that he can continuously use Moria to kind of stabilize and maintain his hand size and keep spawning a lot of blockers too. So these are the 4 most, I guess, popular 3-cost options that you have available, and for me personally, I think these 3 are the ones that I would want to include in the EB01 focused deck, probably along the ratios of like 2, 4, and maybe 2 or 4, depending on how much aggro you want to push. And then from there you can kind of decide what is the best ratio for yourself. Okay, so next I wanted to talk very quickly about 2k counter options. So I mentioned earlier that you can of course use the Otama alongside the Shachi and Penguin, and 2 of the other good options for 2k counters are the 2-cost Red Sanji. So this card is mainly good because it supports your NL matchup a little bit, and depending on your meta as well as how many NLs are in your locals, this card might be very crucial in preventing your board from getting Gadatsu'd and taking a lot of unnecessary like board damage from that. But because it's only good in the NL matchup, I don't really like using this card that much. I would probably recommend instead to use the 4-cost Hitokiri Kamazo, because this card is really good into both Moria as well as Sakazuki, because it helps you to clear like Sindri's, brand news, Tashigi's, cards like that, and make sure that they don't get as much value from like Hound Blaze or just having additional Dawn to attack you with brand new and things like that. Of course, it's also a 5k body, so it's good in order to just, you know, turn sideways and attack your opponent. And the fact that it just clears the board and reduces the amount of pressure from Hound Blaze is very, very crucial in the Sakazuki matchup as well. So I would recommend probably Otama and Kamazo as your two supplementary 2k counters, maybe at a 2-4 or a 3-3 or like even a 2-2 half ratio is pretty good. That's what I would recommend for EB01. Sanji is, if you really hate losing to NL, I think Sanji is a good shout, but I would probably only run 2 at maximum. So that's it for the 2k counter slot. I don't think there's any other like real very good options for 2k counter outside of these 3, but of course if anyone has good recommendations, feel free to leave them in the comments, and then we can of course discuss that a little bit too. Last but not least, I guess the final slot is for blockers and defensive units. So of course we have 5-cost kit as the primary option for that, and then we also have Chopper and Shiraya that we mentioned in the 3 cost unit slot. We also have the 5 cost Queen, which is really strong because of the draw 2 and discard 1 that allows you to maintain hand size as well as to filter out breaks in your hand, for example if you have too many Gordons or anything like that. And importantly, it lets you look for cards that are very crucial in the deck because RP Law doesn't have any very good searchers in the deck. Having this is a good way to maintain your hand size and as well as to find cards that you need. So I think that's one of the key reasons why I think it's a really good card. And the last blocker is Blocker Law. The 4 costs on play. If your opponent has 7 cards or more in hand, then you can make them discard 2 at random. So this is really good for reducing your opponent's hand size. The one way to look at it is also kind of like if you're playing Kid and Killer and you swing 7k at your opponent, they will have to burn 2 hand cards. So just like that with Blocker Law, if you play Blocker Law and you use this effect, your opponent loses 2 hand cards. So it's a very similar kind of slot there as well. I think it's a pretty good shout against BY Luffy as well as against the NL decks. This will be a pretty good tech in order to really punish them for maintaining such a high hand size. And then the last option, although it's not exactly a blocker, is a decent option as well for defending your board as well as to kind of save you that one last turn you need before lethal, which is Radical Beam. It's a 1 cost event, counter, give one of your leaders or characters plus 2000 power, and then if you have 2 life or less, give it an additional 2000 power, so 4k guard on a 1 cost event. It's actually pretty easy to have enough Dawn to leave it open, and it's a pretty good bluff as well because of the fact that you can leave that 1 additional Dawn open from, let's say, your 5 cost key effect, or just by playing your turn and then just leaving an extra Dawn, or by using a leader effect into a Born Clay, for example. You will also get that 1 active Dawn available, and you can use this to block with your kit as well to protect yourself from a 9k swing from a Moria or a Yamato, which is really good. Not only that, of course, it also protects your board, so when your things are rested and your opponent tries to swing into them for like a 7k or an 8k or a 9k swing, you can use this to protect your characters much better. And the important thing is, by protecting your characters, of course, you're able to push for lethal and more damage next turn, or you're able to trade into your opponent's characters the next turn as well. So this is a pretty decent option that I've found myself quite liking recently as well. So all that being said, I think RP Law is a pretty flexible deck in terms of the, like I mentioned, that last 20 card slots that you want to put in. Of course, you will need 2k counter, you will need more blockers, you will need more 4 cost attackers and things like that. But I think the choice of what you kind of put in is pretty flexible, and I think if I were to give you my recommendation for an EB01 list, it will look something like this on the screen right now. I think this version would probably give you a pretty good matchup into Sakazuki as well as Moria, which are going to be the key decks that you have to face in EB01. And then of course this deck also does really well into Reiju. Against NL, I think there's a pretty good matchup if you know how to play the matchup well, and I'll be showing you how to do that in a future video as well. Similarly against BY Luffy, because in EB01 they don't have the 8-hit Luffy 5 cost that KOs a 4 cost unit yet. It's actually a much better matchup than it is currently in OPO7. But as you can see from my flagship experience as well, it is a matchup that is definitely winnable, and if you know how to play it right, you can definitely still catch a lot of wins. In EB01, even though in my personal experience I was playing Sakazuki still in EB01, and I actually didn't manage to face a lot of RP Law in my time in EB01, I think RP Law is a very powerful deck because of those new buffs in Born Clay as well as Kid Killer. I think Kid Killer especially is a very, very powerful card. Being able to attack for 7 for cheap for only 4 costs is really, really good, and I think it's a deck that you definitely have to look out for in EB01. I've shown you a lot of the different options, and like I mentioned, because the deck list isn't exactly set in stone, there's no best 50, it's really a best 28 and then the remaining 20 that kind of depends on person to person based on play style as well as preferences. It's not something that you can very easily predict. And again, because this deck doesn't have searchers when it comes to fighting an RP Law, your opponent doesn't really know what the best way to deal with you or what you're actually going to do on this turn primarily. I mean, yes, there is a perfect curve, but I think it's something where it's not what your opponent can predict every single game, because the deck is so dependent on what you top deck and what you draw. But if you get good at the deck, I think it will definitely take you very far. It's a very fun and very challenging deck to pilot, and I think it's probably similar to Sakazuki in the sense that I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the difficulty of it, as well as I enjoyed the different kind of mini game of the resource management and the Dawn that I had to manage. and when I play well, I can feel like I'm getting rewarded for playing well. So it's another reason why I would recommend taking up RP Law if you know have the have the chance to as well. That being said, guys, I think that's it for now. I will be uploading more RP Law videos moving forward as well, especially after OP07 ends and I'm a bit more willing to share my deck list. In the meantime, I will be attending the Indonesian Championships in, well, Indonesia, which is the last and the only OP07 large tournament available, and I'm really hoping to take home a top with RP Law as well. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and if you like the video, make sure to drop the video a like, drop a comment if you have something you want to tell me, and also subscribe to the channel for more One Piece and other TCG content. I really appreciate all of your support so far, and thank you, and peace out. Bye bye.